So yesterday, I apparently blew up the internet. I blew up the internet because of something that I said on this show. What exactly did I say that blew up the internet? Well, I touched the political third rail. I talked about Social Security. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's so spicy about Social Security? And I will admit, I was thinking the same thing because there are a few simple facts of the matter with regard to Social Security. One, we don't have the money for it, and it's a Ponzi scheme. And two, with regard to sort of the personal decision to retire, very often when people retire, they're making a bad decision. This is what I said. I want to play you the clip of what I said yesterday, and then I want to discuss why exactly this was so controversial. And I think it goes deep.
What's up, you guys? Welcome to my channel, The Dissident Debrief. We're going to go back in time, and we're going to listen to one of the times where Ben Shapiro completely destroys his credibility and his audience, and one of the first times where Ben really started to decline in my eyes. So let's get into it.
To the root of something that's happened on both the right and the left, which is this weird idea that work is somehow demeaning and bad and terrible, and that somehow purpose and fulfillment don't come from work and don't come from church and don't come from family. So where do they come from? That's a broader argument. We'll get to that in a moment. I want to play you this clip because this apparently...
So right off the bat, Ben positions this as people don't want to work and that work is bad. And as you'll see here, it's not that work is bad. He's telling people that they don't have a right to retire. In other clips, he said that people don't have a right to live and die in the town that they grow up. So let's continue.
Set 1,000 hearts aflutter. And let's be real about this. It's insane that we haven't raised the retirement age in the United States. It's totally crazy. Joe Biden, if that were the case, Joe Biden should not be running for president. Hey, Joe Biden is 81 years old. The retirement age in the United States at which you start to receive Social Security and you are eligible for Medicare is 65. Joe Biden has technically been eligible for Social Security and Medicare for 16 years, and he wants to continue in office until he is 86, which is 19 years past when he would be eligible for retirement. No one in the United States should be retiring at 65 years old. Frankly, I think retirement itself is a stupid idea unless you have some sort of health problem.
See, that's what really set people off. Him saying, frankly, I think retirement is a stupid idea. Well, let me ask, are Ben's parents retired? Yes, they might contribute to the church or family, but this idea that people just have to work forever and have no right to retirement, the reason why people have so much focus on this is because, you know, after the age of 55, 60, energy levels decline, and what really people are reacting to is people see older people at Walmart or Home Depot just to make ends meet, and they just deep down know that that is not right. Ben has made his entire living behind a microphone, and he has no issues with retirement. If we shouldn't retire at 65, then what are we paying into with Social Security? There's probably bigger arguments on maybe we need to cut the program off altogether and have people invest themselves. But to say people just have to pay into the system that they're never going to get is just totally crazy.
Everybody that I know who is elderly, who has retired, is dead within 5 years. And if you talk to people who are elderly and they lose their purpose in life by losing their job and they stop working, things go to hell in a handbasket real quick. But put all of that aside. Okay, so those are two arguments, right? So those are two arguments. One is we have to raise the retirement age. And two is that as a general rule, it is not a good personal decision for people to retire early. And I say even right there, unless...
To say that retiring at 65 is retiring early is just totally crazy. One of the biggest problems with people who work W-2 jobs is as you get older, it is harder to get a job because whether legal or even though it is illegal to discriminate against age, the reality is people who are older have a hard time getting hired because then private companies will make the individual decision that, oh, we don't want to hire this older person because they only have, let's say, 5 to 10 years left in their career. And this is something that Ben would probably completely support. Like, private companies get to do whatever they want.
We're talking about people who suffer a physical or mental malady as a result of continued work. So, for example, you're a bricklayer and now you're 65 years old and your back is gone. Obviously, you're going to want to retire from being a bricklayer because you have a physical malady, which I literally said on the show yesterday and everybody is ignoring. But let's go through these arguments one by one. Because the first argument about raising the retirement age or privatizing Social Security or changing the Social Security system, this is considered the third rail of politics. And as I said in the show yesterday,
and that part I agree with. I think something needs to change, but that's like a bigger conversation. What really set people off is this idea that it's stupid that people should retire at 65. I don't think it's stupid. I think we should have a country where we're able to retire. Maybe the one income household is long gone, but to say that people can't retire at 65 is just totally crazy.
Donald Trump hasn't touched it. He's the first Republican in a long time to have basically said the entitlements are off the table. We're not going to do anything about them. And I've said before, that's a smart political move. But smart political moves aren't necessarily good for the country. Both parties now argue that we can't touch Social Security. We can't touch Medicare. We can't touch Medicaid. The entitlement programs basically have to stay. The problem with that is that, of course, they're all going to go bankrupt. So politicians obviously have an incentive to keep kicking the can down the road and pretending that we have unlimited borrowing power. And
yes, we don't have unlimited borrowing power, but why is it always that the Social Security or programs that are used to support Americans in this country are always the first to go for Ben? But if it's more war spending, he's all for more defense contractor bonuses and an ever-increasing national debt for military-industrial complex.
Unlimited money to pay for a ballooning public debt. That, of course, is their incentive structure. But I'm not running for office, so I can tell you the truth, which is that if we don't raise the retirement age or privatize Social Security over time or make any changes to Social Security, we will go insolvent. Social Security is not...
Another thing that will make us go insolvent and be unable to pay our debt is just continuing to spend on forever wars, which he is fully in support of, given today's climate.
In fact, a lockbox. I saw a lot of tweets yesterday from people saying, I paid into Social Security. I'm just taking out what I got in. No, you're not. You absolutely are not. The government stole your money and paid it to somebody else. And now they're stealing somebody else's money and paying it to you. And I promise you that whatever you paid in is certainly not what you're getting out. You're either getting out way less. In my case, you're getting way less in Social Security, if ever you receive it, than you paid in. And in many cases, you're receiving far more. So my grandmother, for example, receiving Social Security, got way more than she paid in. Because Social Security is not a defined contributions plan. It's a defined benefits plan. Right? Social Security tells you how much you receive, but it has nothing to do with how much you put in. Social Security is a pyramid scheme. It is a Ponzi scheme. We are taking out trillions of dollars in debt to fund people retiring from work who are not somehow unable to work. That was the point that I'm making, is that many of the people that we are paying not to work right now, who are 65 years old, yes, they paid into the system, but that is because the system should not have taken their money in the first place. You should not have your money taken away from you by the federal government and then spent somewhere else. And then later, somebody else has to fill you in.
Unless it's for war.
And you should be able to keep your own money. That's how you plan for retirement. And in fact, even the name Social Security is a euphemism. Because originally, what Social Security was an old age pension. That's what it was. And in fact, if you look at the history of Social Security, what you see, the history of retirement and Social Security, one of the things that you see is that it was an attempt to get older workers off the payrolls to make room for younger workers. The first kind of full Social Security scheme was put in place by Otto von Bismarck in Germany, and was a way of clearing the older payrolls of older workers because they weren't as effective. And in fact, older workers fought it. But in any case, when you look in America at the history of old age pensions, what you see is that in 1862, when the life expectancy was 39.
It's always funny when Ben makes his arguments and he goes way back in history to tell you about the origins. He rarely gives like a plan on like what should be done, or meeting people where they are, like kind of addressing or kind of empathizing in any way what people are feeling in their world today. He'll give you this whole histrionics going back to the 1900s to tell you why you shouldn't feel the way that you do.
There were some pensions that you could apply for if you were a Civil War veteran or if you were disabled, which again makes some sense talking about people who are physically disabled. In 1890, when the life expectancy was 44, the law was amended to include disabled Civil War veterans who were disabled for any reason. In 1906, life expectancy 50, the law was amended to include old age. Now, why am I using life expectancy statistics? I'll get into that in a moment, because I've seen some community notes talking about the fact that if you make it to 50 or 60 and you're living in 1906, you're likely to live till 75 or 79 or whatever. That's the wrong statistic, and I'll explain why in a second. The Social Security Act was signed into law by FDR in 1935. Again, life expectancy at that time was 60. And it kicked in Social Security at 65. Okay? It created a federal safety net for the elderly, unemployed, disadvantaged Americans because of the Great Depression. And again, the main stipulation was to pay financial benefits to retirees over the age of 65 based on lifetime payroll tax contributions. But of course, the original contributions had never occurred. So the earliest Social Security recipients were not actually getting out what they'd paid in because there was no Social Security tax. We'll get to more on this.
So now that we have this whole history lesson, we'll see if he actually proposes a solution.
In just one moment. First, using the internet without accreditation with the Social Security Trust Fund, which doesn't really exist. Again, all that money was paid out before. It's based on new taxes. That Social Security Trust Fund is set to empty in 2037, at which point taxes will be enough to pay for only 76% of scheduled benefits, at which time all the benefits are going to get slashed. Why is that happening? The answer is demographics. In 1960, approximately 5 workers covered the benefits of one retiree. So 5 workers paying into the system, that covered the benefits of one retiree. Today, 2 workers cover the benefits of one retiree. That is unsustainable. Our demographic pyramid is upside down in the United States. We have too many old people, and we don't have enough young workers, which means that the Ponzi scheme is collapsing. According to the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, quote, the declining ratio of workers to beneficiaries creates financial difficulties for Social Security. In 1960, the Social Security program had revenues of $12 billion and outlays just shy of $12 billion. By 2021, the smaller ratio led to outlays of $1.1 trillion exceeding revenues of a little under $1.1 trillion. And that gap is going to continue to grow. By 2034, the last year before the funds are expected to become depleted, the Social Security's trustees expect that costs will exceed income by $437 billion. And when those trust funds are depleted, benefits will...
And I don't know about you guys, is like, I think just listening to Ben Shapiro, like he just always sounds so agitated and angry, and he's not a very effective communicator in like selling you on what to do, because he just sounds so angry and agitated all the time.
Then be limited by the income assigned to the program. And absent changes to the law, benefits will be reduced by 20%. So again, why is this happening? 2 demographic factors. 1, people did not have enough kids. You can support this pyramid scheme so long as there are enough young people who are there to work to support the elderly as filtered through government programs. But there aren't. People are having fewer babies. 2, people are in fact living longer. Around 1960, that was the end of the baby boom. The average number of children born to a woman was 3.6. Today, that number is 1.6, which is not replacement level. In 1960, if you reached 65, if you reached retirement age, you're expected to live to about 80. Today, you're expected to live to about 85. Again, according to Cato Institute, the cost of Social Security to the American taxpayer, excluding disability, in 2022 was over $1 trillion. By 2033, that's going to be $2 trillion a year, well over $2.1 trillion a year.
And maybe we need to cut the military defense, in quotes, defense budget. Trump wants to move it up to 1.5 trillion. You know, I'm in favor of a strong country and somewhat of a military presence, but this idea that we just have a ballooning military spending, and the first thing to go is always the entitlement program.
In that year, borrowing authority for Social Security is exhausted under law, so unless Congress acts, benefits get slashed 23%. As far as the generalized debt problems with Social Security, Medicare and Social Security are now responsible for 95% of all long-term American unfunded obligations. When you hear people say that it's the Defense Department that's bankrupting the country, that is wrong. It is Medicare and Social Security. Social Security is already responsible for about 11% of the entire 2023 deficit.
And even that, I think, is like a little bit misleading. Like, yeah, maybe on a yearly basis, we do spend more on Medicare, Social Security, all those kinds of programs. But if we're spending $1 trillion every single year on just on new defense technology, and then you think about the last 20 years where we've been in these exploratory wars, some estimates, I think it's like around like maybe 8 to 20 trillion in national debt from our forever wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. Yeah.
And according to the Social Security and Medicare Board of Trustees, this is them, the people, right? These are the people who run the thing. According to them, Medicare and Social Security, their unfunded obligations, which is about the 75-year unfunded obligation, meaning it's not funded by any of the law today, exceeds $78 trillion. $78 trillion, which is 3 times all the goods and services produced in the United States last year. So in other words, this ballooning Social Security program is bankrupt. It is. It's just a question of when the bankruptcy becomes evident to everyone. So that is where we are. Okay, so argument number 1, which is that we have to change Social Security because it's ridiculous that people are retiring at the age of 65 and then receiving benefits for legitimately 20 years, and that's going to bankrupt the country, and it's already bankrupting the taxpayer. That's obviously true. Everyone knows it. Democrats know it. Republicans know it. They just lie to you. So people are like, well, why don't politicians say this? Because they'll lose. Because they know that you don't want to hear it. Because there was somebody who tweeted at me yesterday about all of this, and he suggested, well, I paid for my parents, and now it's my children's friends' turn to pay. It's like, that's not the way that society is supposed to work. I don't want my children to pay for me. My goal is to be able to invest enough so that I can cover my children, not the other way around. And by the way, it is worth noting at this point that it will not be our children paying for us. It will be debt paying for us or immigrants paying for us as we retire. Okay, so then we get to the second argument, and this is the one that apparently set people off really a lot. Okay, the second argument that I make is that I think that retirement generally, for a lot of people, is stupid. Okay, here's what I mean by that. So, I don't mean that you retiring from a job that's backbreaking labor is stupid. That's your personal decision. The argument that I'm making is sort of twofold. One, that the government has no actual obligation to fund your retirement if it allows you to keep your money in the first place. If it stole your money, then I understand. People who had their money stolen by the government, they want their money back. I get it, totally.
Totally agree with that point.
Then there's the question of what retirement actually constitutes. There seems to be this idea about that retirement is natural, that you hit 65 and you go sit on a beach somewhere for the next 20 years of your life.
I think that's an overgeneralization. I think a lot of people want retirement time to travel the world, take care of grandkids, golf. Maybe some of it has to do with being on a beach. But just in general, people want a break from having spent 40 years of working. Most people don't just think, I'm going to retire and just give up.
And whether that is publicly funded or privately funded, the point that I was making yesterday is that I do not think that as a general rule, it is good for people to consider themselves retired from the world. I don't think that it's good. Retirement, particularly in the post-familial, post-church age, harms mental health. It robs people of purpose. Again, I'm not saying that you can't retire if you want to. If you have the money to do so, go for it if you want to. And I'm also not saying you should be forced not to retire if you can afford to retire. I'm making the case that actually early retirement, by the data, tends to harm your health. That working longer tends to be good for you. That is the argument that I'm making. Again, not that you should be forced to work if you don't want to, and you can afford to do it, or your family will take care of you. The argument that I was making is that when you are 65 years old, if you retire, if you make that decision to retire, that's a decision that you should take really seriously. And this bizarre idea that the best thing you can do, so much that the government should sponsor it, is retire. And when I say retire, I don't mean get an alternative job. Okay, you're not retired. If you quit your job at 65, or you are forcibly retired by your company at 65, and then you take Social Security, and then you have another job, which is what a lot of people do, you're not retired. You're retired from that job. You're not a retired person. Okay, the effects of the retirement I'm talking about is you retire from your job and all jobs, and you live on your pension or your Social Security. That tends not to be good for people in terms of health. According to the
I think that's true to a degree. When my dad retired, he was kind of forced out of work, actually. He was forced out of work, and then he was unable to get a new job because at the time that he lost his job, he was 60. And then he could never get back into the workforce because he was 60 and he didn't have enough saved up for retirement. And I do agree with Ben here that if you retire and you do nothing, it is not good for your mental health. I definitely saw that with my dad. His sense of purpose of being a man, it kind of declined over time because he didn't have that structure or that thing that he was working towards.
BBC, quote, research from the Institute of Economic Affairs suggests that while retirement may initially benefit health by reducing stress and creating time for other activities, adverse effects increase the longer retirement goes on. In fact, this study found that retirement increases the chances of suffering from clinical depression by around 40%, of having at least one diagnosed physical illness by about 60%. And of course, that's not particularly surprising, because for a lot of people, they find purpose in the thing that they've been doing for the past 40 years.
So we're going to stop it there. And this was really a big moment for the Daily Wire. I mean, Ben really has a way of saying things where he really offsets people, really puts people into a tizzy. And I totally understand like where people are coming from. Like, he directly said like he thinks retirement is a stupid thing, and then I guess he goes on to explain it as you just saw. But let me know what you guys think, and like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.